Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Hello and welcome to Countryside here on Manx Radio. I'm Simon Clark.
And I'm Kirree. We hear from the young farmers talking about the Christmas tractor run.
And I went along to the Curragh Wildlife Park in Ballaugh to find out the latest news from General Manager Kathleen Graham. But firstly, Kirree, before we get into things on this week's programme, we've found two bits of interest from listeners, which we'll chat about later in the programme, and we'll do that up to the coming Countryside episodes up until Christmas. Because one or two people were asking, we talk about various things to do with sheep, ewes, yearlings, things like that, and we talked to David Broom, cereal crop growers, Will McMillan and people about spring barleys and winter wheats and things like that. So we thought we'll gather one or two of these bits and pieces together and go through a bit and try and explain some to the listeners, which would be nice.
It really will. At the summer shows in particular, the many questions we do get asked when we're displaying our sheep and cattle is absolutely fascinating, and we do take it for granted that everybody knows the agricultural speak. So touching on some of the interesting points is certainly something we can talk about, certainly.
Yes, but you've had a trip to a bit of education this week, or last week certainly.
I did indeed. I popped along over to Chorley where they were holding a CVAS course. Now, the CVAS course is a Countryside Educational Visits Accreditation Scheme, and that entails opening up the farms or generally going into schools and talking about agriculture. Now, I see this as being quite important with just farming in general to get across the points of what's happening on the farm to the general public, but also is run by a company called LEAF, which is linking the environment and farming, and that is the way agriculture is going now, getting a balance between the environment and farming. And it was really, really interesting to learn the different points of having risk assessments for people and children to come onto your farm, but also going into schools and talking about everything to do with agriculture that fits in with the national curriculum. It was a really great course and would highly recommend it to anybody that's in agriculture or just wanting to learn how to deliver a session to the wider public or school children to get involved. And that's CVAS. It's ran by the Access to Farms Partnership, which is a really, really great movement to get more people understanding where their food comes from, what farmers are doing on the farm, getting that connectivity back together again. There's been a little bit of disconnect in the recent years, and now it's really important that we get to the ground roots, back to education and talk about food and everything with it. Recently at the Great Taste Awards in October there, I spoke to some of the people involved with basic farming, and we had a visit from a DEFA member, and he was saying we have to go back to basics and it's all about education, and that's from somebody quite high up in government. And
it's interesting some of the points that you brought up there about risk assessments and some of the older generation farmers, of course, not the paperwork side of it, but I suppose educating people now and getting help to make it easier to do paperwork and setting up templates and things like that is the way forward for some.
Oh, absolutely. This course was for the most basic of non-computing farmers or anybody involved with agriculture generally. The help was readily available. Everything is laid out, and they're wanting as many farming people to get involved as they can, to get the gates open on these farms, to get the general public in to see what's going on. No more behind closed doors, and see where their food comes from and ask those awkward questions and get involved. On the Isle of Man, we've got a great food industry here, a great agricultural farm landscape as well. It's just a stunning place to live, and to get involved, no better way than getting out on the farms.
And that'll lead us nicely into the first of our questions, Kirree, which somebody was asking, why do we not need as much wool for clothing as people did years ago? Well, why is there not, much bales of wool and what have you getting distributed or sold?
Well, this is it. It was one of those really, really great products that was so sustainable year in, year out. The sheep need shearing. They grow the woolly jumpers for the winter, keep themselves warm, and then the farmer shears them when the weather gets hot, because obviously you don't want to be running around with a big woolly coat on. But that product then was taken and scoured and made into jumpers and different garments. But now, since the oil based and the plastic has come into forefront. It's easier to make it out of plastic. A lot of hard work goes into transforming the wool from a basic product into a jumper, and it shifted away. But Great Britain was made on wool. The export of our wonderful wool out, and the money that it brought to our country was just phenomenal back in the day. But now with the shift in coming away from those petrochemical plastics, who knows, wool might be making a real good comeback.
Indeed. Thank you for that. We'll have more in the coming weeks and in the programme as well. But I went along to the Curragh Wildlife Park in Ballaugh to speak to the general manager there, Kathleen Graham, to find out what the winter hours were for the opening of the park and when people could get there during the Christmas holidays. But firstly, I put it to her that the park and the staff had some quite sad news recently.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we obviously care greatly for our animals, and the keepers put a lot of effort into it. So it's always particularly sad, I think, when you lose an animal just a bit before their time. I mean, we accept that nobody lives forever, none of our animals live forever, and some of them are quite much shorter life than a human. But many of our residents reach a ripe old age, and Kush was, still in his prime, so it wasn't really quite his time. So it was a little bit of a shock. But, we have lots of animals who are very much alive and need our attention, and so you can focus your mind on that and remember all the positives. But I guess that's the nature of our work, is you don't get the highs without having the lows as well.
But, focusing on Kush on the happier side, do you remember when he came to the park?
Yeah, I think he came from the Highland Wildlife Park. I remember that. And he was still quite young. And at that time, we had our previous male who passed away at the age of 16, and Frisco in the main panda enclosure. And he moved into the small side panda enclosure because it was time for him to leave his parents, and the studbook keeper didn't have anywhere else for him to go. So although we didn't really need another panda, so to speak, at that time, they had to go somewhere. And that is part of the studbook, and the studbook keeper's job is really to manage the population within all the IAZA zoos. So that's the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria, and that's where the breeding programmes are. So he needs to carefully manage the space, he needs to balance the genetics. And I remember Kush coming. We hadn't specifically requested the panda, but the studbook keeper had reached out and said, does anybody have spare panda enclosures where they could take a spare panda? And we said, yes, we do. So Kush came from the Highland Wildlife Park.
Yeah, is it unusual that you were able to get another panda straight away after the other one? Because obviously they're quite rare around the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's about 500 or so pandas in the studbook. There's also the America studbook and Southeast Asia. So zoos work globally to manage these captive populations, and they connect them to conservation work out in the field. But I know there's about 500 at the moment in the European studbook. In the wild, in the Himalayas, you will find definitely less than 10,000, and sometimes numbers are estimated to could be as low as 2,500. So the red panda is an endangered animal, and it's very important that we have these captive populations, and it's important that we connect that to conservation work in the field. The Red Panda Network is an organisation that we've donated to in the past, and I'm pretty sure we'll be donating to again. Our conservation fund's been doing very well this year. And we donated to Plant a Home. So they were planting trees in Nepal, connecting corridors of panda habitat so that the genetic population can be a bit healthier in the wild. Because one of the interesting things is in zoos and wildlife parks, sometimes our populations are actually healthier because they're genetically managed. But what you have in the wild is where they're increasingly fragmented, they actually can become quite inbred out in the wild. So these are things that if they're not inbred out in the wild, then they can be more resilient. So it's very important that these panda habitats are connected to allow as much genetic diversity and to increase populations in the wild. So I would say it's not just about the animals that we have here in the park. It's about connecting that and allowing people to come to the park to give their donation to the Conservation Fund. Unless you opt out, you're charged it. So don't opt out. Don't say you don't want to pay it. Do pay it, because it really is important work. And what it means is that we are really making a difference. And by coming to the park, you can make a difference. By being a volunteer, you're making a difference. So it's connecting not just these lovely animals that we love having and we like to see, and we've got that safety net population in captivity. It's really important that we do something with the habitat out there. There's no point in having these safety net populations if all the wild habitat disappears. So so Kush has done his bit, not just for being quite famous as himself in the Isle of Man, but actually for helping raise awareness about red pandas in the wild in the Himalayas, and he's done his bit for raising money for them, and so he's going to be missed.
Is it one of the difficult parts for younger people, or are they better than adults in a way where if you talked about snakes or spiders that were endangered, when you get a nice cuddly panda or something like that the kids are so used to as teddy bears and things like that, are they more likely to learn more about them than the sort of biggie boogie bugs?
One thing I've learnt about people is they have their different favourites. I'm not really a great bug person, and I'm not really a great snake person. I'm not very comfortable at handling snakes. I do if I have to, but I'm not great. But you see, some people are mesmerised, and that's what attracts them. For some people, it is the cuddly mammals, and then you get your people who just love birds and everything about birds. So I think there's an animal for everyone out there, whether it be a creepy crawly or a slimy thing or a cuddly thing. But there's no doubt that brightly coloured animals are more attractive, and animals that we see more often, things like the meerkats, although they're not endangered, they're a great animal for engaging people because they're always busy and we can kind of connect to them. And I think what happened with Kush, obviously his escape escapades were well documented, and that just caught people's imagination. And we often, I suppose wrongly, put human feelings on them. And, he was imagined going out for a pint of milk and being told off by the missus and things like that. And that's good if it connects people, but we really need to use that and go, actually, there's a real issue here for red pandas out in the wild. Of course, we've still got 4 red pandas at the moment. So Kush was, everybody always wanted to see Kush, but we've got Sarah, we've got Aria, who is due to move as the breeding programme, and we've got our cubs Milish and Jinsart. Excuse me if my Manx pronunciation's not that great. So we've still got our red pandas. He still lives on through his daughters, and Aria is being paired with a male at Birmingham Conservation Centre, so she's due to go off there soon. So his line, if you like, goes on.
Kathleen Graham, the General Manager of the Curragh Wildlife Park in Ballaugh, and them opening hours, of course, Thursday to Sunday, and then the Christmas holidays, they'll be open as well for that. And don't forget that discount that you can get as well on the Thursday, because obviously the cafe isn't open on the Thursday, so you get in a little bit cheaper. And the way Kathleen was saying there, that the bits and pieces of it that are helping, the donations with your admission fees or your annual fees that go through and help the preservation of these animals, which are rare, some of them.
They really are, and so endangered as well. But Kathleen and the team have done a great job there, going in the last sort of 5 years to get bits for Countryside. The improvements alone in that handful of years, the signage, the pathways, making it so much more enjoyable and accessible for everybody to get around the park. They've done a great job, and the animals look so well and healthy, and some of the breeding programmes, the success they've had is just absolute credit to all of them there.
It is indeed. You're listening to Countryside here on Manx Radio with Kirree Kermode and myself, Simon Clark. Well, we're getting near the festive period, of course. Lights are up in various houses and the trees are getting put up. And you wouldn't think some of the farmers of the Isle of Man get into the Christmas spirit as well. But the tractor run has been a phenomenal success, not just for the camaraderie amongst it, but for the charities it raises money for as well, Kirree.
They are so supportive of the charities, the Young Farmers Movement, and throughout the year they do all sorts of different events. And missing the annual Young Farmers concert this year was such a blow, but they're hoping that this tractor run will be the saviour of the year. Lots of people line the streets to see the tractors go past. I caught up with Hayley Crowe and Charlie Corkle to see what was afoot. So here we are tonight with Hayley Crowe and Charlie Corkle. It's fast approaching, Hayley, the tractor run this year.
It feels like we've already been planning it for a long time. Probably nobody sees that outwardly. They think it just comes together on the night, but it's a labour of love, isn't it, really, Charlie? It takes a long time and a lot to organise, and there's a lot of people that are involved that we owe a huge amount of thanks to. We've got all of the local authorities. We get huge support from the Isle of Man Constabulary, from all the emergency services, who are all putting tractors in the parade this year. Last year we had the police in. This year we've got an ambulance tractor in as well, and hopefully, if they can pull it off, a fire service as well.
Brilliant.
So we've got massive amount of support from all of the island, really.
And talking about that, I do believe that this coming Thursday they're down in Strand Street, the emergency tractors.
Yeah, hopefully if they get pulled together, there'll be police tractor, and there'll be 2 tractors in the street. That's the main goal, and something a little bit extra, which we're holding close to our chests at the minute. But
A little surprise. A little surprise. That's it, isn't it?
A little surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. But this year you've got a couple of routes planned just to take in all corners of the island.
Yeah, we're really mindful. The event really is a community event, and we really want to make it as accessible to as many people as we can. So that's why we're playing about with the routes, really. We've pretty much got the northern side nailed, haven't we, with a new starting point this year. But the southern route, we're just sort of working out that one. So this year we're starting in Port Erin on Friday night down at the Marine Centre. We've got the tractors all starting there. So we've got currently registered, as at tonight, 35 tractors for Friday night through Port Erin, which is a lot to manoeuvre. We couldn't do it without the help of the public, really. We're asking them to not park in certain places. We're closing off roads and things like that. So we couldn't do that without the public support, and we really do appreciate that, don't we? Brand new for this year, we're going to be through Castletown Square. Don't ask me too much about that one just yet. It's going to be tight, and it's going to be different. But yeah, we're just really pleased that we can do that. There's so many people that we want for them to be able to watch the parades.
And that is it. But this is all for charity, isn't it?
Yeah, this year we're raising for Reach IOM and the Hyperbaric Chamber, 2 worthy charities. And the thing that we've always tried to do from the start is pick 2 charities but never have the same one twice. So we're trying to spread it around, try and spread it as best we can between different types of charities and whatever benefits the Isle of Man the best, really.
And over the past 4 years, Charlie, you've raised a huge amount of money.
Yeah, we've raised just over £25,000, so this year it looks set to be just as good, hopefully, if we can, meeting our target.
It's important to say, though, that we haven't really got a target. The first year, it was very much, it was an event for our members. It was about us. It was about the guys wanting to decorate their tractors and show them off and enjoy it for themselves. And the first year we raised £750, and we hadn't really understood the impact that the tractors would have and how much the public would get behind us, because then in year 2 we raised £10,000.
Wow.
So, from year 1 to year 2, the jump was huge. But the money that we raise for charity really is just the icing on the cake. It's not really what the event is about, but the fact that people can find a little bit of cash in their pockets and decide to send it our way, it really just makes it for us such a special night.
Obviously, it's all walks of life that are getting involved, Hayley, but is there still room for other sponsors to come on board?
There is, yeah. We've got different tractors that are sponsored by different individuals, but there's still plenty of opportunities. If anybody does want to sponsor a tractor, there's still plenty of time. So if you just get in touch, give me a ring, 467-279. I'll be happy to chat to anybody that wants to get involved with us.
The time and effort that all of these tractor drivers put into decorating their tractors, getting all the mud off them and getting the lights fastened on, it's just brilliant, isn't it?
We couldn't do it without them. It's the amount of effort that goes in. I don't think people realise that some of these guys, they've got the tractors being used right up till the last minute to go out and feed cows, especially at this time of year, feeding the sheep and that kind of thing. And then they get them washed off, start to decorate them, which always takes a lot longer than what you ever anticipate, because the amount of lights that you put on them is just unbelievable. And these guys then, they finish work, they come straight out to us, so we feed them as we go round, give them a drink and things like that, and it couldn't happen without these guys putting the time and effort in that they do. We're so appreciative. Every year we get some new faces, but we've got some people with us that have been with us from the start. This will be their 4th year of sitting in the tractor for several hours, which a lot of them are used to anyway, to be honest with you.
It really is good. And Charlie, if we don't see them out on the track, we can always see them up at the grandstand this time.
Yeah, if you do miss it, we're finishing at the grandstand. That's to give us a little bit extra space, just so we can accommodate anybody who doesn't catch it on the route, especially Douglas, with it being difficult at the moment. So hopefully in the far distant future we'll be able to have them going through the middle of Douglas, but just at the moment it's a little bit difficult, so we're trying to cater for everybody on the island as best we can. So
brilliant. And where can people find out where the tractors are up to? They've just finished work. How can they find out where they are and go and watch?
They need to get on our Facebook page, which is Isle of Man Young Farmers. All the information's on there. There'll be loads of stuff happening live on the night. There's maps and things like that are available in the run-up. There's no way that you could possibly miss it.
That was Hayley Crowe and Charlie Corkle there from the Federation of Young Farmers talking about this week's tractor run.
Yes, and looking forward to it as well. Everybody, I think people are used to it now. The great that the constabulary, as they said, are behind it and warning everyone and putting it up on their road watch on the constabulary pages where they'll be and roughly what times.
It's just such a great spectacle coming through any of the villages there, and especially in Kirk, Michael, they were saying they normally get the streets fully lined with people. But to see the work and effort that the farmers have gone to get the mud all cleaned off the tractor and the fairy lights up, but also the various other companies that have sponsored a tractor to go around there, some of the office-based people loving to see their tractor with all of their colours going through the villages. It's just really, really great.
Well, we mentioned wool earlier in the programme, Kirree, talking about why there probably wasn't so much going on in this day and age, but some general terms just before we finish to do with sheep. Obviously, you're well versed in it with your experience in the sheep world, the ovine world, is it?
Absolutely.
But another question was, there's different terms. There's a tup and a ram. Is there a difference?
No, they're just the way that different areas talk about different languages. So we'll say, we're having a skeet tonight. Well, that's also our slang for we'll see what's going on tonight. And it's the same in different parts of the country. Some refer them as rams and some refer them to as tups. We use both at home on the farm. But it just means a male sheep, an adult male sheep generally.
Yeah, and of course the lamb is the young one. The ewe is generally the mother sheep. But you hear other terms like shearlings or yearlings, don't you, as well?
That's right. So your general sheep is usually the ewe. And as she grows up, she's a lamb, and then the next year she's a shearling or a yearling, which is 1 year old, and then she goes into being the ewe, the stock ewe, and she could be 3, 4 onwards, right up to some sheep live to 10, 11 years of age. So once they're after the first sort of 2 years, they're just classed as a ewe.
Yeah, and the shearling thing, I think, comes in as the age between the first time that they're sheared, is it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So when they transfer over from being a lamb in the first year, when they're sheared for the first time, they become a shearling. So that's when they're taking their first beautiful first layer of wool off. And it's just a great turn in the year in that May time when they're sheared for the first time. And then she'll go on. The next year she'll be a ewe.
Yeah, and why do they have their tails removed in general?
Well, usually because they can't use toilet paper like we do, it's just to keep the flies and the muck from collecting around the back end. And the flies, when they strike, they can be very, very troublesome and it can be fatal. So we take the tail off within 24 hours of its life. It's just like when we have a hair bobble round our wrist. It just creates a little dent like that, cuts the circulation off, and within a matter of days it will drop off.
Oof. Okay, well, we'll leave it there with that thought on this week's Countryside. We're back next week for more. If you've got a question, let us know. Send it on an email to countryside@manxradio.com. Don't forget the podcast on Manx Radio's website, powered by Millie Chaps of Ramsey. Hear all the interviews in full at your leisure and the previous episodes as well. We're back next week with more. So until then, from me, Simon Clark.
And me, Kirree Kermode.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.